It's a reasonably short Q&A, so
so if you want to change the slides, do you want to this one? Yeah, left and right. It should be set up. I think
That's like that. We might as well rock them and all.
Are we opening the one first?
yeah, let's do that very quickly.
All right.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Okay. If it doesn't go in, try to.
How's the go?
No worries. Luckily you had the net.
Yeah, did you read it?
I did.
Yeah, there's a lot of construction going at the moment.
But you got mine's here, but it's pretty easy to load up.
Do you just want to draw one from?
That was enough for me.
No, your. Like it's not recognizing. Okay, there. Thank you.
Just drag it on. So scroll down. Surgical innovation and music.
This one?
Yeah, drag it on.
I'm gonna. I'll double check the swing and then maybe like.
If it doesn't work. Okay. Hi everyone. We might just get started since it's already 5 or 6 minutes past 6. So once again, welcome to our Surgical Innovations and Research Forum. It's really great to see you here, and we've got some fantastic speakers for this evening, which will share their knowledge and wisdom with us. So we're very fortunate for that. Just very briefly introducing who we are as MUSIG. So we're a large student-run subcommittee of the MUMIS, which is the whole student society for medical students. And yeah, we've got quite a lot of committee members. Every year we hold surgical and procedural skills workshops. We hold lectures and also discussions and information nights such as this one. And also we have an anatomy revision night at the end of the year. Yes, here's just some photos to see the sort of things that we do. So that one's from the MMC workshop, and we've got the College of Surgeons workshop there as well. And we do some basic and slightly more advanced simulation activities. We had some great speakers come along throughout the year, outstanding speakers, both senior consultants to registrars and even junior doctors who have a lot of knowledge and advice that they can impart to us. So what's in store for the rest of the year? We've highlighted in green there the lecture evenings, discussion evenings like this one, and in black are the workshops. If you haven't already followed us, we've got some social media platforms and websites that you can keep up to date with the news that we put out. Just thank you very quickly to the sponsors. We've got some textbooks and from Elsevier today, so that will be an e-raffle. If you haven't entered in that raffle already, just jump on the website and follow the instructions to enter. If you're a pre-clinical student, you're welcome to join our committee. Applications are currently open until the 12th of March. Okay, so without further ado, I might invite Sophia, who's one of our vice chairs, to introduce our speakers. Thanks so much.
Okay, so our first speaker for the evening is Professor Julian Smith. Professor Smith is the head of the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Monash Health. He's the head of Monash University's Department of Surgery and deputy head of the School of Clinical Sciences. Professor Smith has been a lifelong academic surgeon with over 250 peer-reviewed publications, including large international trials in the New England Journal of Medicine. He was recently a member of the first cohort of graduates to obtain a Master of Surgical Education from the University of Melbourne, and was the first Australian to receive a fellowship of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. He has broad clinical research experience in general and cardiothoracic surgery, including organ transplantation and minimally invasive surgical techniques. Would you all please join me in welcoming Professor Smith?
Thank you so much. Thank you very much indeed, and I better have a bit of help to bring up my first slide. It's there, but the second one may not be. It's you, Jeffrey.
It's going straight to the other.
Yeah. So anyway, I would just like to take you through a pathway in academic surgery, talking about my own experience, but also giving you guys an approach that you might like to adopt should you pursue a career in academic surgery. There are a number of pathways, but the most important thing is to have as smooth a pathway as possible rather than get caught up in the jungle and have a very topsy-turvy journey to reach your aspired goal. And the milestones in academic surgery are quite well defined, and you guys are obviously at the earliest stage. However, you can make use of medical school to lay the foundations of a distinguished academic career, and I'll go through that shortly. And then we move on through the stages of a surgical career, and there are many opportunities at each milestone. I began at the opposition, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view. But in medical school, I think the most important thing is to be a good student, work hard, and be professional. And along the way, gain exposure to facets of surgery and surgical research. And there are a variety of ways in which it can be done. It can be simply as a holiday or short-term project, but actually the logistics of that are really quite challenging. For you guys to come in and join a research group for a very short period of time with not a lot of experience, it can be fairly daunting for yourselves, but also quite challenging for the supervisors. My best recommendation, if you want to get involved in surgery and surgery research in medical school, is to take a dedicated period of time out from your studies. And that's probably best as a Bachelor of Medical Science, which is offered at this university. Going forward, there will be opportunities to do research within the MD degree, which is coming at Monash. Are any of you guys in the new MD course? I suspect not. Yes, okay. So there will be opportunities to have a period of time of dedicated research, and surgery is one of the options within the MD course. And some medical degrees can be combined with a PhD, MBBS or MD PhD. And that's a real challenge, but it can be done. But I think the most important thing is to get broad surgical exposure within medical school. You can in some ways fast track a surgical career by carefully selecting your year 5 rotations. If you, say for instance, want to pursue a career in neurosurgery, you might do a medical rotation in neurology, a surgical rotation in neurosurgery, and you might say pursue an imaging rotation as an elective. And of course, be active in groups such as this. So there's ample opportunity to lay the foundations of a surgical career or even an academic surgical career. As an intern and a junior doctor, you can gain broad surgical exposure by requesting rotations to surgical specialties of your interest, but it's worth getting as broader exposure as possible. At that time, you can also acquire basic surgical skills through working with registrars and residents in the operating room, in a skills lab, going to a course, etc. A variety of opportunities. And if you have a particular interest in surgery, you can channel your interest and heighten the experience in that area. At the same time, it is possible to do some clinical research projects without necessarily taking time out, but it involves a lot of after-hours work and an extra commitment. And you can do sort of chart reviews, case reports, just things that heighten your exposure and start to stretch up your CV. Some people take dedicated time out to do research in these early years, and there are certainly opportunities to do that. That could take a 1 year time, 1 or 2 years out to do a master's, or an extended period to do a PhD. And you might decide to do a basic science research time or a clinical time. The recent review of medical intern training suggested that there may be opportunities for research training and research experience even in the intern year, but that's yet to be affected. Having spent a few years aspiring to surgical training and managing to get in, surgical education and training is set, run by the College of Surgeons, does mandate a minimum research requirement. It's not all that onerous. It may even be a paper or presentation. It's certainly not full-time research, and it's not a higher degree. But every surgical graduate of the College of Surgeons is expected to have some skills as a scholar and a teacher. And here is a further opportunity to pursue a career in academic surgery by doing research projects, by taking out dedicated time to do a higher degree, and pursue something in the basic science or the clinical area or a combination. I did a fellowship in general surgery and then cardiothoracic. That was a fairly long training period, but dedicated time to do a higher degree. So there are many different ways in which you can handle this, and I'm sure Jeffrey, Julian, and James will give you other examples. Having graduated from the College of Surgeons, many surgeons spend time at finishing school, which is essentially a fellowship of higher surgical training, either locally or overseas. And they're usually at centres of excellence in a particular area. I spent time at Stanford University in Papworth Hospital. Julian spent time at Papworth Hospital doing heart and lung transplantation, because that was a particular interest of ours. And at those hospitals, we were able to partake in clinical research projects. But it also gave us an opportunity to network and collaborate with academic surgical leaders internationally. And that's a real highlight of an academic surgical career. And that laid the foundations for ongoing collaborations when we returned as consultants. And I was fortunate to work at the Alfred initially in cardiothoracic surgery, particularly in heart and lung transplantation, and was able to have a combined clinical and academic practice. It's sometimes difficult to get dedicated academic time as a consultant. That's really an ongoing challenge, and also to decide how much time you want to devote, if any, to private practice as well as public practice, because it all encroaches on academic time. The important thing as a consultant is to pursue excellence in clinical practice, to capitalise on your previous experience as a trainee and as a fellow, and then decide what academic pursuits you'll take on. Taking on a high degree as a consultant is particularly challenging because of the time constraints, where you're pressured to perform well as a consultant, but also to do high quality academic work for a higher degree. People can do it, but in surgery, my recommendation if you're pursuing a higher degree is to get it earlier during your training rather than as a consultant. And fortunately, I was able to get experience in the niche area of heart and lung transplantation, was able to focus and describe various techniques and new innovations in association with the late Professor Esmore, and it gave me a great opportunity to publish and present in my area of interest. Then comes the area of promotion up the academic tree, and that's based on performance and merit, publications, presentations, grants, research performance. And then, as time goes on, one takes on more leadership roles within surgery and also a mentoring role, because we're only as good as the people we train, and we mentor medical students, junior doctors and trainees to succeed us in the academic endeavour. Further down the line is involvement in external organisations such as the College of Surgeons and specialty societies, where academic surgeons have a particular skill in being able to lead those groups. And then we move on to non-clinical pursuits in later life. It's not all hard work, but an academic surgeon has a lot of skills and capabilities and a great capacity to put back into the system and contribute. And it's not only through looking after patients. Academic surgeons can take on significant teaching and research roles later in the career, or continue what they have been doing for many years. Administrative roles, boards, consulting, contributing to the College of Surgeons and to other organisations. And as time goes on, there is really an increasing demand for those people who have broad academic and clinical experience to contribute further. I think one of the most important things is mentoring. And I've been privileged to have some very distinguished and loyal mentors, both here and overseas. And they make a great contribution to one's career. And it's not necessarily one person, it might be multiple people at different stages of the career. Maybe a clinician, a researcher or a scientist, And they have important roles in modelling behaviour, motivation, inspiration, as well as friendship and support. And so, as an academic surgeon, we're recipients of mentors, but we also evolve into becoming mentors ourselves. And it can happen very early on. A senior medical student may mentor a junior medical student, or a junior doctor may mentor an even more junior doctor. So it is a part of an ongoing process of succession. So hopefully the pathway is smooth, but I've painted a fairly rosy picture, but it does certainly have its challenges. I'm particularly interested in trying to foster academic pathways, not only in surgery, but in other medical endeavours. And I'm a part of an organisation with multiple stakeholders, and we're trying to lobby a government and funders to create positions at varying stages of an academic career to allow aspiring academic surgeons and physicians to move in a steady pace and with opportunity along the pathway. And look, it's a tough gig. I mean, there's not a lot of money out there and support for academic medicine. There's a lot of pressure for service and looking after patients. But the Working Party is trying to lobby various groups to get some funding for these positions. And we hope we can create a pathway from medical school to consultant practice where there are good academic opportunities. And there is such a model in the United Kingdom, which we are paying quite a lot of attention to, and hopefully something similar can be introduced in Australia and New Zealand, and you guys can be the beneficiary of such. Now, what are the goals of a career in academic surgery? Well, there are multiple, and they vary from person to person. To further the art and science of a given surgical discipline, we all want to put back into the system. We have been beneficiaries of our mentors and a wonderful opportunity to learn and to work as an academic surgeon. It provides diversity. You just don't go to work and cut and sew as a surgeon. As an academic surgeon, you are teaching, you're researching, you're leading, and having a very diverse career. And it keeps you engaged. You don't burn out nearly as quickly because there are multiple interests. And if something is a bit boring and frustrating, you can turn your attention to a different aspect of your working life. People have told me, I only want to be an academic surgeon, I want to be a professor. Okay, that may be your reason, but it's hard work. And but it can be achieved. And others say, oh, just to finish off, get to the end of the pathway and have a good time doing non-clinical pursuits. So be it. Everybody has a reason. I just wanted to briefly draw your attention to one aspect of surgical research that I've been involved in is research in surgical education. It mightn't really be something that you think is terribly sexy, but there's a lot of interest in trying to train people better and really to adopt some contemporary educational principles in what we do. Long gone are the days when training surgeons just turned up to the operating room and watched the master surgeon in action and then went off and started up their own practice. And surgical education is really, in the last 5 years, has evolved into a very legitimate area of research. And the College of Surgeons has established a master's degree in surgical education, and a lot of people have taken up the opportunity to participate. I won't go into too much detail, but certainly the college is particularly interested in surgical education and its research. So let me just finish with a few tips. The important thing is to follow your dreams. The pathway that I've articulated isn't all what it seems to be. I've painted a fairly rosy picture. But if you want to pursue a career in surgery or academic surgery, it might be a little bit rocky, but you must stick to your guns and pursue your dreams. Planning well in advance is critical. To think about what you're going to be doing 2 or 3 years in advance, because it's not simply a case of just going and asking someone for a job or getting on a training program. It requires a fair bit of planning and hard work, certainly to build up your candidature to get into surgical training, and then to take the next step, getting a consultant job, and then if you want to go up the academic tree, to pursue that. I've talked about mentoring. As I said, I think earlier you do a higher degree if you want to, the better. To develop a clinical and academic niche, which you become something you own and really become an expert in. You need a certain amount of flexibility when opportunities arise. They might come out of left field, and you might not think of going that, say, moving interstate or going to another hospital that you haven't worked at, these sorts of things. Don't forget the work-life balance. Humbling yourself into submission too early or too hard. So it's something you must be careful with. And don't ignore the educational activities I've mentioned, and also enjoy yourself. It's a very rewarding career, and something that myself and I think my colleagues would highly recommend. So thank you for coming, and I wish you all the best. Right. That's okay.
So our next speaker tonight is Professor Jeffrey Rosenfeld. Professor Rosenfeld is one of Australia's leading academic surgeons and senior military surgeons who is internationally recognised for his neurotrauma research. He is the director of the Monash Institute of Medical Engineering, a senior neurosurgeon at the Alfred Hospital, professor of surgery at Monash University, and adjunct professor of surgery at the F. Edward Herbert School of Medicine in the USA. In addition, he is a major general in the Australian Defence Force and was Surgeon General for the Australian Defence Force Reserves in 2009 to 2011. Professor Rosenfeld's main research areas of interest are traumatic brain injury and bionic vision. He was awarded the King James IV Professorship of Royal College of Surgeons in Edinburgh for his pioneering surgery for hypothalamic hematoma in children. He is extensively involved in research, publishing over 270 peer-reviewed articles, 41 book chapters, and 2 books. Please welcome Professor Rosenfeld.
Okay, thanks very much, Genevieve, and it's great to be here and to be invited to speak to all the students today or tonight. And much of my talk will be probably, well, complementary to Julian's talk. There'll be a bit of crossover. I'm not going to talk too much about the role of the academic surgeon as a leader, as an administrative leader, as a leader of the field. I'll talk a bit about the field. I'm not going to talk too much about the academic surgeon's role as an educator. Julian has already spoken about those key aspects. What I'm going to focus on is the actual research part of being an academic surgeon, which is probably the main purpose that anyone would want to become an academic surgeon, apart from surgical education, but that's also gets into the research realm as well, as you just heard. And I'll concentrate not so much on the pathway which Julian outlined so beautifully from medical student to surgeon, but some of the philosophy behind why you would want to choose a career as an academic surgeon, the philosophy behind it. which applies throughout your career, but you can start thinking about some of these things now. So, you know, should I take, I being you, take time out of my standard training in medicine, or as a medical student, or as a junior doctor, or even as a senior doctor, or as a consultant? And Julian has answered the question pretty well. But this is what you, and I agree with him that it's not a great idea to take time out to do a higher degree when you're a consultant surgeon. That's a hard ask. I did it. In fact, in my case, I was, believe it or not, I was told that in those days, and going back a few years now, that academic surgery was a waste of time. You want to be a surgeon, go and cut, learn how to do surgery, be a surgeon. We don't need surgical research. Leave that to others. And that's what I was told. So I had to really, you know, think about why I would want to be an academic surgeon when I was being given that information by my mentors, by my supervisors. Now, hopefully these days, the surgical supervisors know more about academic surgery than my original mentors did at that time, and would not ever give out that sort of advice. So the advice now is, if you're interested in academic pursuits and you want to answer some surgical questions by doing some research, we give every encouragement for that. But take time out to do it. Trying to do it over a Christmas vacation, as summer vacation, as Julian said, very difficult. You won't get that much done. But if you, and I have students that come to me and say, can I join the neurosurgery department while I'm at the Alfred Hospital doing all their different rotations? Can I join your department and do research? And I have to say to them, you can, but it's going to be very difficult. You probably won't accomplish that much. You'll probably be sitting down in a room at night going through medical records to get a case series up and maybe do a case report or a small case series, and that's probably about as much as you'll get, which is okay. And really, you have to ask the question, well, what is the motivation behind the request? Is it just that the student wants to get a publication so they can get on to an internship at a particular hospital, or indeed get onto a surgical training program? There's nothing wrong with that. Or do they genuinely want to pursue an academic career as their main goal? Now, it can be very difficult to decide that early on. You may not be able to decide whether you want to go in that direction till you've actually observed what the career involves to be an academic surgeon. We were never given this talk when we were medical students, I can assure you. I never did. So it's great that you have asked us to come to sort of give you a bit of insight into what the future holds and how you could possibly develop an academic career. Doing simultaneous research and clinical work is really challenging. I think Julian's said that in his talk, and I would also echo those sentiments, that it is really quite a big challenge to combine research and clinical. And that's why taking time off is fine to do a degree in a particular research theme or question, but then you have to get back to your clinical work as a surgeon, and then how do you actually continue doing the research as a surgeon? Because that's what academic surgeons have to do. You can't just do research for 5 years, then stop, and then do clinical work and you're going to be an academic surgeon. If you really want to be an academic surgeon, you really have to do research, have a research brain throughout your career. I'm sure that my colleagues would agree with that. You always have to be thinking about what the next research project is going to be. It never ends. It's through your whole career. So if you're not going to be interested in pursuing that, if you just want to get a paper to get on a program, fine, but you're not going to be an academic surgeon. So let's look at the positives. An academic surgery career is very exciting, as Julian said. Always doing new things, you're stretching the boundaries. I mean, many surgeons will end up these days super specialising in particular operations. Like there are orthopaedic surgeons who virtually only do knee surgery or only do shoulder surgery. There are neurosurgeons who only do spine surgery. They get very good at it. They get extremely good at it. And people refer patients to those surgeons because they are so very good at what they do. But very few of them become academic surgeons as well because they're so focused on that particular operation and getting as many patients as they can to have that operation that the academic side falls by them. It's not part of their career, and that's fine. Many surgeons don't have any academic pursuit in their career at all. We would like to think that through their surgical training, they come to understand what academic surgery is about, and they will continue following the literature and go to meetings and understand where the academic boundaries are being broken in their specialty, but they're not interested in the ones, they don't want to break the boundaries. They want to just continue doing the same thing. They might improve different aspects of the operation and they might report on that. And that's an academic element of their practice, but it's usually a very minor component. Scientific inquiry is what it's all about. We want to answer fundamental questions in our field that haven't been answered or that have an answer, but the answer is fuzzy and it needs a lot more work on it to try and refine it and get to a higher standard of care with better outcomes than what's currently being offered. And one can only do that by doing rigorous scientific research, either in the laboratory or clinical trials. Learning how to do laboratory research and clinical trials is an academic pursuit on its own. It can take a number of years to learn how to do those things well. And that's what we talked about before about taking time out. For instance, if you're going to do a clinical research degree, you might want to take time out to do a period in epidemiology and statistics. If you're doing a laboratory project, you might want to take time out to understand molecular biology and how to actually investigate molecular happenings in the laboratory. You have to decide which direction. Innovation. You have to be interested in discovering new things, about being creative in your endeavours. Good surgical researchers are innovators. They discover new ways of doing things or new concepts in surgery that haven't been done before. New equipment, new applications of drugs in surgery, new tools for surgery. The list goes on and on, but it's innovation. Surgical researchers are trendsetters usually. They're at the forefront of the field. They're stretching the boundaries. They're not satisfied with the status quo. It is a very satisfying career, as Julian said, because it's exciting, it's very broad. You can change it over the years to follow different fields. You don't have to stay in the same field all the time. And part of your work is teaching, administration, and it builds from there. It's a satisfying career. Interestingly, I haven't spoken to Julian about this talk. We both sort of come to the same conclusions, if you like, just by thinking about what we've both done. So that potential is also there to help large numbers of patients with surgical research. If you're an individual surgeon, basically you're helping a small number of patients through your career because you're dealing with individual cases, if you like. As a surgical researcher, you're discovering a new way of doing something which might impact the whole of surgery. The whole of the surgical world will be altered. I mean, Julian's publication in the New England Journal of Medicine will have changed practice in cardiothoracic surgery. That's what surgical research is all about. It's changing the mindset of your surgical colleagues because of new discoveries that you've made yourself. That's why it's very exciting. And of course, there may be some commercial outcomes. We don't do academic surgery to make money. Quite the reverse. We do academic surgery because of all the reasons I've mentioned. You're not going to make a lot of money as an academic surgeon. You're not going to have a big private practice as an academic surgeon, by and large. Very few do. But if you discover a new device or develop a new device or a new treatment, a new operation, or particularly a new device, that may lead to a commercialization of that device and some ongoing income from that. That's possible. But that is a small aspect, usually, of an academic surgical career. What about the negatives? It is difficult, it's challenging to combine research and a clinical career. It's very difficult to sustain the research through a busy surgical career, particularly if you're trying to do private practice, because you keep getting rung about patients and the other doctors are referring a patient to you. It's very hard to say, no, look, I have to go to the lab tomorrow. I'm not going to be able to look after that patient. It's very hard to do that. A lot of surgeons find that very difficult because they want to look after the patient, but they're torn because they want to do their lab work as well. Which are they going to do? The dilemma is there for them to try and decide what the balance is going to be. That is difficult to sustain, and it's difficult to develop that private practice and become recognised as a very fine surgeon as well as an academic. And in fact, in the past, many professors of surgery really had very little practice at all. Many of them were regarded as poor surgeons because they didn't do much surgery. And understandably so, because they were busy in the lab and they were doing all their admin. But really, the best academic surgeons these days are able to combine the clinical practice and be very good surgeons as well as good academicians. That's a challenge. It's time consuming because a lot of our academic work gets done as we're all busy clinicians. A lot of our academic work has to be done after hours. So you have to be prepared to work long hours to do academic surgery. It takes away time from the clinical career, and so the question is, will I be left behind? If I spend a few years doing a PhD, that'll look great on my CV, but I mean, my colleagues, my cohort of surgical trainees is busy going on with their surgical training, and they go and do their fellowships and they come back as staff surgeons, and I'm still doing my training. So this is another question that only you can answer. But usually it's fair to say that taking time out does not leave you behind. It actually puts you ahead, I would say, because you have a different string to your bow. You have a different set of capabilities that someone who hasn't done that higher degree, who's just gone on and done the straight clinical training, does not have. But you have it. So it usually puts you ahead. It usually puts you at an advantage. And I can tell you that for surgical appointments in public hospitals these days, what the selection committees are looking at to separate the candidates is often whether you've done research as well, because they're interested in the teaching hospitals at having academic staff. They want to have people that have an interest in research, because that's what teaching hospitals do. They're high quality research institutions. Salary sacrifice, what do I mean by that? I mean that you're not going to be a multi-millionaire as an academic surgeon, because you just don't have time to build up a big private practice. The income will suffer to a certain degree. You're not going to have 2 Aston Martins like one of my colleagues has. And I don't care. I don't need an Aston Martin. It doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is getting a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine. That means a lot more to me than having an Aston Martin. But that's my philosophy. His philosophy is that it's better to have an Aston Martin. That's the choice. But you're not going to, unless you've got family wealth, you're not going to have an Aston Martin or some amazing income from being an academic surgeon. Let's face it. But that's the sacrifice that you make. Can you be a great surgeon and an academic as well at the same time? Yes, you can, but it's mighty hard work. You're going to have to really apply yourself throughout your career to be able to do both well. So you need to be very determined. You need to be very creative. You need to be competitive. And excellence is a word that I haven't got on that slide that Julian mentioned. You need to be excellent at what you do. Otherwise, you're not going to make the grade. You need to be obsessional. Perhaps I should use the word assiduous in what you do. You need to have a fine attention to detail as a surgical researcher. So you need to be quite obsessional about it. Otherwise, you miss things and your research is not of very high quality. You need to be prepared to put up with frustration as a surgical researcher. Not every experiment works. Many experiments fail and you have to start again and do it again and try something different. It takes time. You have to be prepared to accept failure and rejection. You have to be prepared to put up with drudgery and boredom, because there are aspects of surgical research that do have those aspects to them. And you have to be prepared for slow progress. But on the other hand, when you've reached the goal and you have a PhD in surgical research, that's a mighty achievement, and you will have done some great work to get to that stage. And that will stand you in good stead for the rest of your career, having that sort of higher degree. Master of Surgery degree is great as well. Bachelor of Medical Science, all those things will carry weight and will help you with your academic pursuits. So I suggest, as Julian did, that you choose a good mentor and a good supervisor who's going to look after you and help you and advise you. You need to learn the basics of research very thoroughly. The statistics, the molecular biology, genetics, genomics, proteomics, whatever aspect you're going into, you need to know that area. You need to be as good as the scientists who are doing that area in their own work, in effect. You need to have a long-term plan about how you're going to develop your career. If you do really want to go for surgical academia, or you're going to give it a go and see how it goes, and then if it's not working out, go back to being a surgeon without the academia, that's fine. You have to have options. I think it's best if you have options. So you can be single-minded about being an academic surgeon, but it's also good to have fallback positions and options that can take you in different directions. You aren't just doing it to get onto a program if you're going to do academic surgery seriously. It's not about doing it to get points to get on a program. Otherwise, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Funding is an issue, and you will need to pursue scholarships and even grants through the NH and MRC, which are challenging, but there are grants through the College of Surgeons for surgical researchers. Monash has grants for students to do research. So you need to look into that to help support the sort of work that you want to do, because it may involve getting particular bits of equipment or paying patients to come in to have certain things done to them. That requires some money, and these sort of scholarships can help you along the way. If you're doing complex research involving a number of animals or a number of people, you need to plan the statistical analysis of the research at a very early stage, which involves consulting with experts in statistics. Otherwise, your research will come adrift. And these are the things that your supervisors will help you with. And I put collaborate in capital letters because collaboration is the secret, I think, for a surgical researcher. That's the big secret in this room that I'm going to share with you. I'm giving you my secret now. That the secret to a strong career in academic surgery, particularly if you want to be a surgeon as well, is to collaborate with good scientists, good physicians, other surgeons who are involved in surgical research, and they might be international surgeons, but the more you collaborate, the more research you get done, and the wider the spectrum of research becomes. It's not a solo performance. As in a theatre, you are the solo performer in an operating room, but it's not the case with surgical research. You're part of a team. You're going to be supervised. You're going to have other people you're working with in the lab, and that's the way it is. You have to be able to work in teams. So, as Julian said, dream large. Aim for the surgical research career if that's what you really want to do, because that's what you've asked us to come and talk about today. Keep up your other interests, as Julian said. Look after yourself and your family. Vitally important. If you get so focused on your surgical research and you forget about everything else, something is going to break. You won't last the distance. You've got to maintain your own well-being. And finally, good luck. We're here to help you. How much more time do I have?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. So I thought what I might do is just share with you some of my career, and you'll see the diversity of it, and you'll see the collaboration involved in it. But I also started at the opposition place down the road, over the Yarra, University of Melbourne, and the Royal Melbourne Hospital. We have a lot of similarities, but we got a very good training there. We got a very good education, just as you're getting here. We had some very good mentors. I had very good mentors, despite the fact that they tried to stop me doing neurosurgery and stop me doing surgical research. Nevertheless, they were good surgeons. I learned a lot from them. And I then did my general surgery fellowship, and I did neurosurgery fellowship. The reason I did general surgery was because they told me that there were no jobs in neurosurgery. Forget it. You're going to have to do general surgery, which I did. And then finally, they decided they were going to have some objective interviews, and I actually got on the program. That was the first time they'd ever had interviews in that way. And then I did a post-fellowship training in the US and England, like Julian did. And then I came back. Do you have to do all of that? The answer is no, you don't have to. You don't have to do a general surgical training if you want to be an ENT surgeon or a plastic surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon. It will help. It will be great for your surgical expertise to have that general background, but it's not necessary to do it. You don't have to do it. In fact, in America, as you know, many of you may know, you can go into surgical training in PGY1, postgraduate year 1. You start your surgical training. You go for interviews for what surgical specialty you want to do when you're finally a medical student. So you have to decide very early on. You don't have to do that here. We haven't got to that stage yet. We're moving in that direction, but you certainly will need to know that you want to do surgical training by PGY2 and certainly by PGY3, and then you have to get on the training program. That might take 2 or 3 years to actually get on the training program. So it's going to be a long time. So I did that. I did America and England and came back. Do you have to go overseas? No, you don't have to go overseas. But like Julian said, you have a very exciting time working in a totally different environment, meeting a totally different group of surgeons, having a different group of mentors, having those international contacts for the rest of your career. You understand how the surgical world works, whereas you're not in a sort of a parochial soul environment here. You're getting out and seeing the world of surgery. So it's something to be encouraged if possible. So these are some of the research projects that I've been involved in. Some of them are clinical, some of them are laboratory. I'm currently working on a bionic vision device. That's the most collaborative project that I've been involved in because it's involved engineers, physiologists, industrial designers, physicians, me, neurosurgeon, all combining to develop this new electronic device to be implanted in the brain. Stem cells and their application to spinal fusion and disc regeneration. The cell biology of meningiomas, actually growing meningiomas cells in a dish is very challenging. I had a very brilliant PhD student working on that, a Monash PhD student, a young student who unfortunately developed melanoma during his PhD and he died. But we published his work posthumously and it's brilliant work. I didn't do it, I supervised him. We sort of led him in the right direction as supervisors do, but he did the hard yard and he published one of the earliest publications of how you culture meningiomas and then you can test them with different drugs. They're very hard to grow meningiomas in a dish. The new nanomedicine-based selective treatments for traumatic brain injury. And that's current work that I'm doing with the Monash Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences. There's a scientist there who can make liposomes. They're nanoliposomes, and you can put drugs inside the liposome so that when it enters the brain, it breaks up and releases the drugs. That's quite innovative work. That hasn't been published before in brain injury. It's only recently been published for stroke. So that's new work. That's collaborative. I'm working with a PhD scientist who has the animal models of brain injury. So combining the pharmaceutical side with the lab side, the lab animal side, with my clinical and lab background provides a very strong collaborative project. We've already published one paper in this area. The use of, and that's the use of these antifibrinolytic drugs and blood-brain barrier integrity, which is the next stage of this research. Finding a calcitonin gene receptor as a target for glioblastomas. The neuroplasticity of the visual cortex with MR tractography and MR scanning. The neuroprotective effects of that molecule following TBI was done in collaboration with a scientist at the Florey Institute. Neurogenesis following experimental brain injury was done in collaboration with a neuroscientist at the Central Clinical School. The serum markers of traumatic axonal injury was also done with that scientist. Investigation of inflammatory response of microdialysis was done with that scientist, but we did it as a clinical project in an intensive care unit at the Alfred. The transplantation of neural precursor cells I did as my Master of Surgery degree at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute with a very senior neuroscientist called Perry Bartlett. We recently published an analysis of microRNA biomarkers in traumatic brain injury. Lots of people are trying to reach the holy grail of finding a serum biomarker that will tell you whether someone's had a brain injury or not. The microRNAs are a new biomarker that we've just published. We've collaborated with a centre in the US for that. We've sent all our samples to the US to be analysed because we don't have the analysis here. So that's collaboration again. The hypothermia trial is the polar study is nearly finished now, but I'm one of the researchers on this multi-centre study, not being led by me, but it needed a neurosurgical input into this because it's hypothermia for brain injury as a pre-hospital treatment, which continues on. Also now involved in the ICE study, which uses pre-hospital hypothermia for spinal cord injury. Both of those are NH and MRC funded studies. I won't go into them all, but head impact biomechanics involves putting on an accelerometer onto the back of the head to measure impact forces on the head during football. We're looking at that in amateur footballers and hopefully this year in the AFL to see how that correlates, those mechanical forces on the head correlate with concussion episodes during the game. So we're looking at we've looked at the intensive monitoring of patients with brain injury in the intensive care unit. Published all of these things. The efficacy of decompressive craniectomy was published in the New England Journal. That was a randomized multi-center international trial that we led from the Alfred Hospital. The effect of craniectomy was the precursor to that trial that I did when I was at the Children's Hospital. That was also published that was the first randomized controlled trial of this operation ever done. The trauma reception and resuscitation is a project run by Mark Fitzgerald, who's the director of trauma at the Alfred. And what he's doing is to develop a prompting system for trauma victims when they come into the emergency room, an electronic prompting system, which has up till now been on television screens, which tells the doctors and nurses doing the resuscitation what to do next to help the patient, and so they don't miss out anything. So he's now developing that into a heads-up display in goggles, and that's happening. The effects of head injury on the intellectual development of children. This was a collaborative project that I did when I was at the Children's Hospital with the head of neuropsychology. So what we did was we followed a group of children over 10 years following their head injury, initial head injury, and we published multiple papers on that. The group at the Children's with this work was leading the field worldwide in the long-term outcome for children with severe traumatic brain injury. And interesting, what we found was that the younger children did worse than the older children, because the younger children had their milestones messed up by the original injury. They didn't reach the milestones, so they never reached it. And that's why they did worse. That was the first time that was ever shown. The hypothalamic hamartoma, I developed a new operation for this disorder. Not a hematoma, as you said, Genevieve, but a hamartoma. Do you know what a hamartoma is? You should. Hamartomas are abnormal lumps of tissue that have normal tissue in them, but they're in an abnormal position in the body. And here we've got a tumour, benign tumour, in fact, a lump, which that's rather than a neoplasm, which is a hamartoma, which doesn't grow but causes severe epilepsy in children. And I worked out a new way of removing these and getting good outcomes. So this was published and became a standard operation for this problem. I won't go on and on, but there are a number of other studies, but they're all collaborative. None of them I did on my lonesome. They're all with other people, other specialties. I've also, I think I might finish there actually. That's probably enough from me. But I'll be very happy to take part in the discussion later on. And hopefully I haven't dissuaded you completely from an academic career. But hopefully we've given you some insight into what's involved, and that you will maintain your excitement and your energy and ambition to carry through with this career now that you've heard what it involves. But the word that underlies the whole thing, apart from collaboration, has to be passion. Passion. If you have passion for discovery, you will do very well in surgical research. So passion, collaboration are probably the two keys. Thank you. Probably. You've got this.
I'll just open it up for you.
I'll just quickly announce Jordan Gilly, who comes out from the Alfred today. He's a consultant, cardiothoracic surgeon and heart surgeon. He graduated from the University of Melbourne. and underwent fellowship training in cardiothoracic surgery and heart and lung transplant,
And it's
transplantation
donate
at
time.
Padworth Hospital in Cambridge.
Just wait for it to load.
Welcome, Mr. Gilly. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank you for asking me to talk after two giants of surgery and research in Australia. I don't actually think there's much that I can really add to their comments regarding a surgical career and research. I will say that all the things that both the professors have said, I did not do. I basically did no research in medical school, rushed through my early residency, basically just to get onto the surgical training program, had no idea really that I was going to do cardiothoracic surgery. And ended up at the Alfred Hospital, started work there, and you know, to use the term standing on the shoulders of giants, I think that's really what I felt. I walked into that hospital as a first-year consultant. Professor Smith had just left a couple of years prior to me starting. Don Esmore, who I'll talk about in a second, was there, and really just amazing, amazing surgeons and researchers were there, and there was me. So all hope is not lost, because I really did realize exactly what they said, that, you know, surgery and research are very, very important. And I have been very, very lucky to work in a unit that really promotes it. And I have, much against Professor Smith's recommendations, I've started a Masters of Surgery, and I'm doing it part-time, and it is the worst advice and decision I've made, because it is very, very difficult. But it can work, and the research and the work that I do has allowed me to do, as they say, groundbreaking work that's not been done anywhere else in the world, and I'm extremely fortunate and lucky to be able to be involved in that. So this talk, I decided after seeing that I was going to follow these two eminent surgeons, was basically to show you where all of this research actually leads you to. Looking down those microscopes, looking and talking to statisticians, what does that actually get us to do? And how does that lead us to a great surgical career and to do what I do now? So the first surgical research, which I don't actually think really there was much surgical research involved in it, these are obviously before the birth of Christ. These two people here are Saint Cosmas and Saint Damien. They were two physicians that worked, I think, in Italy. And the person that you see lying on the bed is actually the wife of a very rich farmer. And she, I believe, broke her leg very badly and it wouldn't heal. So these two physicians came up with this great idea of getting a volunteer to donate their leg. And they then performed the first documented transplant. And as you can see, there is another leg on the right limb of this patient. And you can see the leg just very carefully placed down on the ground there. There's no blood, so it's the perfect operation. So these two saints, St. Cosmas and St. Damien, are the patron saints of transplantation. And actually, when I was in Rome last year, they do actually have a church in Rome dedicated to them. So this is the first case of transplantation. And when you actually look at transplantation, the idea of transplanting tissue and those sorts of things is not new. You know, in the 17th century, people were starting to use bone grafts to repair defects in skulls. In France, they were looking at transplanting cock spurs. Now, back in those days, cockfighting was very, very lucrative. And if your rooster died, but it had a really great spur, what they would try and do is obviously transplant it into another rooster to obviously help them make more money. And then as you get into the 19th century, you look at the first transplantation for skin grafts, and then really you're looking at the modern age of surgery and anesthesia, the development of ether as an anesthetic, and obviously the development of antiseptics by Lister. And if you actually read any of the history of Lister and the research that he undertook to determine that aseptic surgical technique could save lives, it's amazing. So, you know, this is medical research way back then. So when you come up to the 20th century, you're looking at surgeons and doctors like Alexis Carrel. He really started researching suturing techniques. Before then, no one had any idea about how to suture things together. And he also began experimenting with organ transplantation. I mean, obviously not very well, but he did experiment with limb and solid organ transplants. And then we get to the mid 20th century when you look at a surgeon like Vladimir Demikov, who's a Russian surgeon, and he was really sort of the first pioneer of transplantation. And, you know, back then things were very different, obviously, and, you know, the idea of medical ethics and you know, proper research it's a little bit, things were a little bit different there, much like the hairstyles and the fashion. So in 1946, he starts doing things like implanting the heart of a puppy into the neck of an unrelated dog. The heart survives. He also did the first heart and lung transplants in dogs, and one dog survived 6 days, apparently. Apparently, there is rumor out there that he also did stranger experiments where he has implanted the head and neck of a puppy onto the neck of a larger dog. And there is journal articles out there which state, and I think that this is where the evidence falls down, he states that the puppy head actually started lapping water from a bowl, and I don't really think that that's probably going to happen. But anyway, he really was a pioneer in inverted commas. From the point of view of cardiac surgery, you know, again, you look at if you just look at the development of the cardiopulmonary bypass machine, you're looking at medical research and development and innovation and courage to take on these sorts of things. It's an amazing thing in itself. So the development of the cardiopulmonary bypass machine really brought cardiothoracic surgery into the specialty that we know now. And right from the start, right even from before cardiopulmonary bypass machines, cardiac transplantation, people wanted to do it. And so, you know, in the 60s, in America, Dr. Hardy transplants the heart of a chimpanzee into a baby, and the heart beats for 90 minutes. Now, I don't think that would pass medical ethics now, but that's what happened. And then again, Dr. Hardy performs the first lung transplant, and I'll talk about that again in a second. And also at around the same time, Doctors Lily Lauer and Shumway began looking at techniques for cardiac transplantation. And around that time, it really was the holy grail of transplantation. People wanted to do it and be the first. These three surgeons were the true definition of academic surgeons. They were not going to just go and do the operation because they knew, as most surgeons do, that the operation is actually the easiest thing to do. And the science behind it, which is really difficult. So what happened was they were beaten. In 1967, Dr. Christian Barnard, a South African surgeon, performed the first heart transplant in a human, performed on a dentist from America, Louis Washansky. And this was before the days of the idea of blood groups, before the idea of immunosuppression, before any idea of what rejection was. So Lewis survived 18 days and died of overwhelming sepsis because the only immunosuppressant that they had was steroids. So after that, the following year, nearly 50 heart transplants were performed, and basically no one knew what was going on. All they knew that it was a simple plumbing problem. You take the old heart out, put the new heart in, and the survival was terrible. As you can see, 22% 1 year survival, no understanding of immunology, and over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, transplantation basically dropped to zero. However, along at the same time as this was going on, Shumway, Lau and Lily High are still going on. They haven't done a transplant yet. Examining for better control of infection, selection of donors and recipients, improved understanding of rejection and immunology, and over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, survival increases to 68% at 1 year. Then, in 1972, the development and discovery of cyclosporin, which was the anti-rejection drug which was developed, and then heart transplantation takes on a more prominent role, and it becomes what we now recognize. Same thing with lung transplantation. Again, experiments conducted in the 40s, but they couldn't understand how to actually do the actual physical operation. Do you do it from the front? Do you anastomose the trachea? Do you do it from the left or the right? How do we breathe the patient? How do we oxygenate the patient, sorry? So in 1963, as I said, a Dr. Hardy performed the first lung transplant, and he did it for unresectable lung cancer. Again, not a lot of science there. If a patient who has unresectable advanced cancer a lung transplant, the patient survived 8 days. Again, problems with selection and long-term survival and rejection again. So really, transplantation of the lung as we know it now really began in the 80s. So the first successful single lung transplant was done in Canada. The Canadian surgeons really pioneered modern day lung transplantation as we know it. And again, the development and discovery of cyclosporin and improved surgical techniques helped get us to where we are now. Just briefly, the Alfred Hospital Transplant Unit was established in 1989, and Prof. Smith's now probably going to get PTSD because I'm going to talk about the program and what we do, and he'll be glad that we've gone, that he's left the hospital. First heart transplant performed in 1989, and the first heart and lung transplant in 1990. You can correct me if any of this is wrong. First single and double lung transplants performed in 1991. I had just finished year 12. I think, when that happened. And it was the first Australasian unit to deploy a homegrown ventricular assist device, the Ventrassist. So just in that single slide, you can see how much effort and research and work would have had to go into doing any one of those procedures. And I had the opportunity and the honor of coming in when the Ventrassist artificial heart was first deployed. I was there at the first implant, and it is amazing. And it instills in you a really strong idea that research goes hand in hand with surgery. I'm just going to skip along here because it's quite a long presentation. So when you look at heart transplants, they are actually falling. And part of the reason behind that is because, again, improvements in medical care have meant that head injuries are no longer as prevalent. And if people do get head injuries, they often survive longer. Now, the thing about that is that when you're in intensive care and you survive longer, you're in hospital for a lot longer, you're intubated for a lot longer, which means that a lot of your other organs will suffer. And typically the heart is the thing that suffers. And because people are living longer and are surviving greater injuries and there are less car accidents, there are now less suitable donors for hearts. And that goes a long way to showing why heart transplants are dropping. So you can see from this table, back in the early 90s, we were doing 30 to 40 hearts a year. Now it's dropping and the average is about 20 to 25. As you can see, artificial hearts, not the Ventrassist anymore, but artificial hearts that are developed in America are now also becoming apparent. So what happens now is that people who with heart failure can now get an artificial heart. So now what happens is that there's a vicious circle now, because you have a patient who has heart failure that would ordinarily need a heart transplant, but now we can put an artificial heart in. So then when they've got an artificial heart and they're out of hospital, and then you get an offer of a heart of a patient that is not quite right. The heart's not working that well. They've been in intensive care for a long, long time. Well, what do you do? So that's what happens. So therefore, heart transplant numbers drop because you're worried about a patient who is doing well on an artificial heart and they won't receive a normal heart. So that's part of the problem here. You can see that the Alfred Hospital, from a heart transplant point of view, sit in the mid-range. We do about 20 to 25 heart transplants a year. And we do approximately now, this is an old slide, but we do about 500 normal heart cases a year. And then obviously on top of that, we do transplant cases as well. I won't talk about that. Lung transplants, we do now 80 to 90 a year. Greatly improved outcome, and there are two specific age indications. One is young, that's cystic fibrosis, and there's an older group that deal with emphysema and pulmonary fibrosis. And you can see just the numbers from last year, we're doing about 90 lung transplants a year. When I started, we were doing about 30 to 40 a year. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. And as you can see, in direct contrast to heart transplants, lung transplants are going gangbusters. They just go up and up and up, because basically we realize now that the lungs are actually quite a hardy organ and can withstand quite a lot of damage, and they will recover once they go into a patient. So you can see this table that we still are increasing. I think that we probably hit a plateau of about 100 a year. And what we are looking at here, and when I came back as a consultant, a lot of research had been done into donation after cardiac death as opposed to donation after brain death. So we won't go into a lot of detail about that. But what that means is that a lot of patients who have non-survivable injuries are not really capable of long-term life, so they will have their treatment withdrawn and they will die, but they're not brain dead. So by having donation after cardiac death, what you're allowed to do then is, as you can see from the green bars, we have increased our lung transplant numbers by upwards of 30%. And so that was 5 or 6 years of research prior to the actual program coming on board. Now, how much time do we have? Because I've got lots of gory pictures. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want me to stop right there? Hey? 10 minutes. Okay. So, Prof, you're going to have hot flushes now because of what's going to happen. So, the heart-lung transplant process. The process begins when this is old, and when a brain-dead patient's family consents to organ donation. Okay, and what happens then is that you get a well-established protocol where the organs are assessed. They're then cross-matched according to blood group, and then all the surgeons, cardiologists, and respiratory physicians are involved in the decision-making process. Sometimes we get to fly in a plane because we do go interstate and we do go to New Zealand. And a team is sent to assess the organs and procure them. There's extensive liaison with the Alfred Hospital and other transplant units, because what you want to do is you want to minimize the ischemic time. And the ischemic time is the time that the organ is out of the body, not receiving blood. And each minute, that organ is undergoing cell damage, okay? We'll go on. So this is us getting in a taxi with our esky and our suitcase full of tools. And what we do is we go to the hospital and the donor is there, and we open the chest and we open the pericardium and we inspect the organs. We inspect the heart to make sure that it's beating properly, that it looks normal, that there's no coronary artery disease, and that the lungs look okay, that there's no collapse, no lesions within it, no major abnormalities. And once we've done that, then what we need to do is, from the organ donation process, what you need to do is you need to wash out the blood of the donor, all of it. And you need to cool the organs down, okay, as quickly as you can. And so what we're doing here is we are inserting cannulae into the pulmonary artery and into the aorta. And you can see that these pipes that we're inserting into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. And what you can see down here is there a pointer of some sort that I can... No? And what I'd like you to have a look at is just, you can see down the end there that there is a... Oh, that, and I won't be as mean as Prof. Rosenfeld and ask you what that is. It's not a hematoma. That's the liver. Okay? So just make note of the fact that it's very dark. Okay? And then what happens is that we instill pneumoplegia, so it's a special solution that runs into the lungs, and cardioplegia, a special solution that runs into the heart. And you can see here now, instead of blood, there's now clear solution, right? And can you see the difference in the color of the liver? It's now a pale color as opposed to that color. And that's because the blood has been drained out of the liver as well. What we do then is we remove the heart-lung block. So that's the two lungs, they're inflated, and in the middle is the heart. And what we have to do is we have to remove the heart from the lungs. That's what we're doing here. And as a surgical registrar, it's the most terrifying thing that you can probably do, because at the main hospital, at the Alfred, is a surgeon waiting impatiently for you to send this back and for you to not stuff up any of the cuffs that you need to make. This is us dividing the lungs into right and left. This is the left lung. And then we get to fly back with the organs in the esky. Okay? So the ischemic time begins from the time of the clamp and the washout. Again, you know, when you're talking about surgery and you're talking about what they've spoken about collaboration, you really, you know, you're talking about an alien environment, abnormal working hours, and those sorts of things. Again, pictures. So this is the heart before we explant it. This is a picture that you don't often see very often. So this is the chest cavity, head up here, feet down here, and the heart has been removed. And we've left 4 cuffs: the right atrium, the left atrium, the pulmonary artery, and the aorta. And this is us getting ready to implant the heart. You can see that there's a stitch running here, another stitch here. And so what we have to do, we have to sew the left atrium, the right atrium, the pulmonary artery, and the aorta together. We can do stranger things. We don't tend to do it now, but I'm sure Prof. Smith's done this before. Orthotopic heart transplant is orthodox, standard heart transplant, which is where you take out someone's heart and you put another heart into the same position. A heterotopic transplant is where you do it a little bit differently. And so what we can do sometimes, if the heart is too small, we can use this small heart as a kind of turbocharger where it sits on the aorta and it provides extra cardiac output. It gives you a really great chest X-ray and a virtually unreadable ECG. So after all that research, does it work? Well, these patients, a patient that gets a heart transplant normally has a 12-month mortality of greater than 80%. Okay, so basically they're not going to survive 12 months. When you look at a heart transplant, if they receive one and they survive, the 50% 5-year survival is 13 years. So all of the things that I've just spoken about lead to this. So when, as Prof. Rosenfeld said, some of his mentors have said, why do you want to be an academic surgeon? This is the reason. At the end of the day, all of that research of thousands of surgeons has led to this. And I'll stop there. I've got lung transplant as well, but it's the same with lung transplantation as well. So even though I kind of fell into this, I can wholeheartedly endorse what they've said, that it makes your career so much more interesting to be part of academia, part of research, and part of the ongoing surgical education of young doctors. Thanks.
So as we're running on time, we might have time for a quick Q&A, which no, sorry, we're just in the process of setting up for that. So how do I? Oh, here it is. Yep, got it. Yeah. Which one was yours?
Yeah.
This one? They just grab it.
Yeah.
Julian, help out.
Yes. Where?
Fairly small lecture here, so I think we can just raise and just get other questions. You all want to start?
So a couple of the presenters have mentioned medical engineering and being pioneering in the field of being involved in technology in medicine as being an interesting field and definitely a field that's growing. I was just wondering about where that research area currently is and how people in our space might be able to get involved with it.
Maybe if I take that one. So, obviously, medical technology and devices plays a very big part in cardiac thoracic surgery. It's playing a bigger part in neurosurgery and a lot of surgical disciplines, surgical specialties. Medical engineering is an integral part of discovering new ways of doing surgery. And so we decided to set up an Institute of Medical Engineering here 2 years ago for that very reason. Sure, it involves physicians as well, because they're developing, for instance, one of the physicians is developing a new type of respiratory inhaler that delivers different size particles when you spray. The very small particles go further down into the bronchial passages than ever before. So it's a very new type of device for respiratory medicine. IT solutions for different aspects of medical practice as well. It's not just engineering, it's IT as well. And so we encourage doctors to work with engineers to build new devices for unmet clinical needs. That's the key. The clinician has to identify where is the unmet need for a particular device, and then we, the Institute, connects them with the right engineers and the right industry partners to actually develop a prototype and then hopefully commercialise it so it can be more widely distributed. Now, there's very recently been a group of students who set up their own mine, if you like, within our mine. That's Monash Institute of Medical Engineering. They've done it themselves so that students can get involved with developing their own new projects in medical engineering. Well, these are engineering students, but there is no reason why, and they've got their own website and presumably Facebook as well now. And there is no reason why medical students can't join in that activity as well. In fact, we were planning to have a competition this year, which sort of hasn't got off the ground yet, but the idea was that the mine would set a couple of problems in medical engineering that groups of medical students and engineering students and maybe science students could get together and solve, but as a competition to see who would come up with the best solution. There's also a competition called MedTech's Got Talent, which you may have heard of, which a number of students from Monash have taken part in over the last few years and helped to develop new technologies. So there are lots of things out there for students to get involved in. So I don't have the exact name of the new website, but I'll give that to your coordinator so he can distribute it to you on your or internet communications. But there are lots of opportunities. In fact, there are now some engineering students who are getting into medicine, so there will be dual-trained engineers and doctors, and they're the cream of the crop because they've got the best of both worlds, and they will have a particular interest in developing new technologies. So if you're very interested in that area, you can finish medicine, you can go to engineering and come and join us.
So firstly, thanks for all of you for coming down to talk to us. I've just got a question regarding introducing new innovations to surgery in particular. So I've been to a few med packs and spoke to Dr. Bas Palmer and stuff. And one might argue that in the medical field, it's quite hierarchical, and some junior doctors will be quite resistant to the idea of introducing a new innovation into a field that is so traditional, if for lack of better words, or so how would you combat that? Like, how would you teach or tell junior doctors to not fear that little part?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just junior doctors who fear change. It's doctors are by nature fairly conservative, and they like to stick to traditional ways of doing things. It's hard for them to break the mold, and maybe the time to change that way of thinking is during medical school, to appreciate the world of innovation and to introduce that thinking into your practice. We're now developing what's called the SPARK program here in Australia, which is a program in biodesign developed through Stanford University. And that SPARK program is going to mentor small multidisciplinary teams to develop new technologies. They'll mostly be graduates, but there's no reason why undergraduates can't contribute to those teams. Another example of what Monash is doing is the MITI program, MITI program, where we send small interdisciplinary groups of students, undergraduate students, into industry during the summer break. We pay them to go into the industry. We set up teams, and there's a MITI office that does that, and you can subscribe and say you're interested in doing it. And they go into an industry over the summer break, and industry says that we've got this problem, could you solve it for us? And in most cases, the students come up with a very innovative solution. So I think it is breaking the mold, and it's breaking down the stereotypic sort of conservative attitudes of some surgeons. But I think you just have to break through that and be determined and strike the right mentors and people like us who are very involved with surgical innovation. And you'll find that professors of surgery usually are, rather than consultants who never do anything different. Those are not the people to approach for innovative techniques. It's actually the academic professors of surgery and their staff who are the ones, and you're going to hear from more of them shortly, who are the ones who are particularly interested in new ways of doing things. They're the people to sort of get involved with supporting your ideas. We certainly do that already. So that's my answer to it. Julie wants to say some things as well.
Yeah, I mean, the academic leaders also have enormous contacts. We may not be able to directly help you, but we can put you in touch with a huge resource of Monash University and the various hospitals and research institutes. But I wouldn't be discouraged as a medical student, because some great inventions have been by medical students. And one in our area in vascular is the Fogarty catheter. I mean, I actually worked with Tommy Fogarty at Stanford University. He, as a medical student, described a balloon catheter that you slide down the artery to extract clots, and still used today. And I'm sure there are many other examples. But it's, again, follow the dreams. And if you reach a bit of a roadblock, you look elsewhere. There's a way around it. And there's plenty of opportunity in a place like this to link in with people who can help you. And there are places full of those who've got tremendous goodwill, to encourage student innovation.
I think one of the other important things and the importance of surgical academia is also to try and realise why some people are saying or pushing a particular agenda. So there are a lot of people out there, a lot of surgeons out there that will push a particular procedure and say, if you don't do it this way, well, you are just old news. You're just not a good surgeon anymore. This is the only way to do it nowadays. And you really have to be mindful of the reasons why people say that, because there will be a caravan of traveling salesmen that will go around the conferences saying all of these things, and you'll go, wow, I have to do it this way because otherwise I'm not up there with the best. But you have to look at it critically to understand, why am I doing this? Am I just doing it to be part of the crowd, or am I doing it for proper, rigorous scientific reasons? And there are countless examples of this in all specialties, and cardiothoracic surgery is exactly the same. We're suffering through that now, where a lot of people are pushing particular techniques, particular technologies for dubious reasons, and you need to be able to scrutinise and be critical. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I just want to echo what these professors have said, that when you have an idea that you have shown, that has been shown to work through rigorous scientific testing and publication, you just need to pick the right setting to get it through, because everything we do as doctors are so highly scrutinized, and you need to understand the process. You need to pick the right hospital to be pitching your idea to. You've got to be picking the right department, going through the due process of being accredited as a trial or as a new technology. Each hospital has a whole or more than one committee that looks at new technology, and you need to be going through the right channel. So it pays to, once you've got the idea and you've developed it to a certain level, pays for you to learn the correct processes to push that further.
I guess I'd like to ask each of you this. Throughout your medical training, what did you struggle with the most and how did you overcome it?
Oh, I might start something with my job. Well, during my medical and surgical training years, medical student years and my surgical training, kind of like Julian, I did no research. Well, that's not true. I did one poster which ticked off my research requirements. So when I was approaching my fellowship, I really felt that research and scholarly activities is a huge gap in my overall picture as a surgeon, as a doctor. So I really wanted to fill that void. But it is not as simple as, I want to do research and you can just walk into the research department and start doing something next year. The opportunity also came when I went to do my fellowship to pursue a PhD, and took the opportunity, and I never looked back since. So it is a lot to do with planning, as Julian had said before, but you still got to be flexible and open to opportunities and open to changes to your original plan. So in each stage, I think your question is about the struggle. So I've overcome that struggle, but then at the end of my 3 years of full-time research, I then struggled to go back into clinical practice. So there's different struggles throughout different stages of your career, but what's always gotten me through so far has been mentors. All these guys up here have always been my mentor one way or another, and again, mentors is about opportunity, faith, and it's like developing any relationship. You can't force it, but you need to be open to the idea. That's how I find it.
Hi everyone, I'm the junior person. So I guess I'm sort of more fresh and sort of quite fresh in my mind, but really for me as a girl, definitely, just to push a gender issue, it's really hard to get someone to go, oh yeah, that's a great idea when you say, I want to be a surgeon, you know? Because they go, oh, what about anesthetics? That's a great lifestyle. What about GP? And what about radiology? And so like, I don't really want to do that. And as you sort of go through, you sort of do sort of see the side where you're like, oh, maybe I don't want to be here all the time. But then you find something that you're just so interested in. And being at work is just fun, you know what I mean? Like, you start off thinking you want to do something and then like, you don't like it so much. But then you find the thing that you really like. Like, I wanted to be a plastic surgeon all throughout med school, all throughout residency. And then I finally did it properly. I was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. But now I'm on something that I love. I'm doing ENT and it's like, this is the most fun. You just do everything that you love. And you just find something like that, do you know what I mean? And so I guess the struggle during med school is, what do I find that I really like? And you don't get to experience too much actually. Actually, as Monash students, we get to experience more than the Melbourne students. And no, I've been on both sides now. So you just gotta try as much as you can. When I first did saw any ENT surgery, I was like, sinuses. Why would I want sinuses all the time? But then you finally get there and you're like, gosh, sinuses are really close to the brain, really close to the eye. That's kind of cool. And so something so routine is actually really interesting. And so you just gotta find something like that. You know? And yeah, you just try as many things as you like. Maybe surgery won't be for you. The girl who I did the surgical interest group with has decided to be PT, and that's okay too. You know, you just find something that you like, and that's sort of how you get through these jobs. Sort of just find something where you don't really work because it's a cliche, but it's true.
I still think, why would you want to look into a science? I think that, and I'm going to ask my colleagues here, I think that the thing that I struggle with is, all of us are quite specialised now, and the operations that we do, there are not any particularly what we would call routine or mundane operations. They're all pretty high pressure. And I think we would all agree that there is a finite number of operations that you do need to do to maintain surgical expertise and skill. And I think that what I find difficult is trying to balance that, the need to maintain operative numbers and skill, and then also trying to balance the fact that you want to take some time off to do research. And I think that that's a really difficult thing because, as everyone has said here, in the past, if you were an academic surgeon, people thought you were an academic surgeon because you were a crap surgeon and you didn't want to operate. And that's definitely not the case. But how do, especially the two profs, how do you balance that?
Well, just to answer I suppose the same question about struggles. So the struggles for me, I suppose, are threefold. You have to learn how to handle failure. If an operation goes badly, as we were just talking about, if your patient suffers a bad complication or dies from your operation that you did yourself as a solo, as I said before, that's a very difficult thing to cope with mentally, and that's a real struggle. Am I going to do that operation ever again? Am I going to go and take lessons in how to do the operation better? The thing is, what you have to do is analyse. First of all, you have to deal with the family and explain, and the patient explain why you think it happened and apologise if it's a bad outcome. You didn't purposely do it, obviously, but then you have to try and work out why did it happen. What did I do during the operation that led to that problem? So that's an analysis that you have to go through. But it's a struggle to deal with complications like that because, when you're a surgeon, you want to do the best for your patient and get good outcomes. And when you get a bad outcome, you wonder whether you should be doing it at all. Is this going to happen again when I try this again? Will I ever do it again? These are the questions. I know a surgeon who did a cervical fusion operation, which is a very standard operation in neurosurgery, to take out a spinal disc from the front of the neck. And unfortunately, something happened that was, I don't know exactly what happened during the operation, but the patient ended up quadriplegic from that operation. Quadriplegic when they were moving everything normally before, and they were permanently quadriplegic. That surgeon never touched a knife again. Never touched a knife again. That devastated his whole career. So that's the ultimate example of that. But it shouldn't need to come to that. Hopefully you won't get such serious problems. But when you're dealing with neurosurgery and cardiothoracic surgery, some of your patients are going to die. And you have to face that. That's a struggle. Second struggle is the work-life balance. That's a real struggle. If you've got a family and you've got a partner and children, how much time are you going to spend with the family, and how much time are you going to spend developing your academic surgical career? That's been a struggle for me. That's a real struggle, because the more time I spend on the career, the less happy the home life becomes. The more time I spend at home, the happier the home life is, but the less happy the academic side is, and the less sort of productive the academic side is. So getting that balance is really difficult. And that's a struggle. That is a struggle. Is, I suppose, about the third struggle. I can't remember what the third one was. I'm going to think about it and I'll come back to it. My Alzheimer's creeping up on me. I had it in my brain, but it'll come to me.
I certainly agree with what Jeffrey has said about adverse outcomes. But I'd like to put myself into your shoes and tell you what the biggest struggle is going to be for you guys, just going forward. And I think the biggest struggle will be getting into surgical training. Surgical training is becoming exceedingly competitive. There are a lot of doctors graduating each year, and there are not that many jobs around. It's very different to when Jeffrey, James and Julian went through and got in surgical training. Selection into surgical training was very different. But nowadays it's very competitive. A lot of people are trying to get into all the various surgical specialties. So the first thing you've got to do is decide which specialty you want to pursue. And I would agree with Hannah, it's essentially elimination. I believe you get as broader exposure as you can as a medical student and as a junior doctor to inform your decision making. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, but I wanted to be a neurosurgeon when I was in final year medical school. I worked with a few of his colleagues, and I had second thoughts, and I eliminated neurosurgery. And those guys wanted me to do neurosurgery, but my experiences were such that I chose something else. But you want to try and get the experience to make an informed decision. And you can begin that experience as medical students. And particularly in the final year when you have a choice of what elective rotations you do. And therefore you want to think ahead about enhancing your candidature for surgical training. And it's good to use the time as a medical student, whether you do a BMed science or do some projects. But as you graduate, is to think ahead. How am I going to best enhance my candidature into surgical training? And that is particularly with the CV, which is something you can influence. You then have to do a good job as a junior doctor to get good referees reports and ultimately interview well, should you get an interview for at the time of selection. But I think having made a decision to pursue surgery, the biggest challenge facing you guys will be getting into a training program. And so my recommendation is to think well ahead, plan, and seek mentor advice about how to go about it. Because there are young surgeons and more senior surgeons who've been through it and can help you. You got the third one?
The third struggle was that I was told, when I did my first general surgery rotation was into the country, and I'd never done surgery before. I hadn't done operative surgery before. In fact, I did an appendectomy when I was a first year intern, and that was a challenge because I'd never operated before, but I was surrounded by a whole lot of medical students who came into the theatre to watch someone do an appendectomy. It was my first one. And so it wasn't easy, that was a struggle, but I did it okay. I thought it was okay. And then I went to the country later on in my second year or third year. I went to the country as a general surgery registrar, must have been third year, general surgery registrar. And the surgeon at the end of that, and I hadn't done the operative surgery before, really. And that was my first experience of actually doing it. And the surgeon said to me at the end of it, well, Jeffrey, I don't think you should do surgery. Don't think you should do it. That was his advice. Well, that was a struggle because I thought I could do surgery. I thought I was pretty good at it. Well, as a registrar, as a first experience, I thought I did okay. I wasn't, there's always a learning curve. That's what I've come to appreciate. Everyone has their own learning curve. Provided you keep improving, you can reach the goal. In many cases, and I certainly reached the goal in my case, but that surgeon didn't recognise that. And if I had taken his advice, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I'd probably be, I'd be physician or anaesthetist or whatever. But it's okay, but I wouldn't have been a surgeon. So, but I didn't take his advice. The struggle for me was, will I take his advice or not? In my own way that I could be a surgeon, because I'd seen what surgeons do, what they did. I knew I was capable of doing it. So I thought he was wrong. I thought he made premature judgment and didn't really look at the future properly. And so I disregarded what he said. And I went on to pursue a surgical career, and I believe I've become, a competent surgeon. Poor advice. So that's the struggle that I had, that you asked what the biggest struggles were. I told you what the biggest struggles were for me. But you can overcome these dilemmas and these challenges in life. And in fact, I think it did me the world of good. To have someone tell me that I couldn't do that was actually great for my future career, because it meant that I struggled even more to achieve that goal, and finally achieved it, despite the obstacles put in my way. It's not good if someone, this is what happens in high school, if someone gets praised for every single thing that they do. They're the best at everything. They're the captain of this, the captain. Everyone's a captain. Everyone's a school leader. Everyone becomes a leader. Everyone gets praised. That's not a recipe for success in society. Children have to learn that sometimes you fail. Sometimes you don't achieve your goal immediately, but then that makes you more determined to jump the hurdle and go for the goal again, try again, which is what I did. So I learned a lot from that experience. It wasn't a pleasant experience. It was a struggle mentally. You can imagine at the time, because I had my hopes pinned on being a surgeon, and then someone says, sorry, you can't be a surgeon. That was a struggle. And as Julian says, it's going to be a struggle for all of you, or most of you, to get over the hurdle of getting on the program. And that's why I say you need to have options. And, Hannah's found her option. She had options. You also need to have options. But at the same time, you have a dream, you have an ambition to do a particular thing. If you've got the ability to do it, and you show that you have the ability by your hard work ethic and the fact that you have the visual-motor skills and the surgical judgment skills to do it, then you should be able to do it, and you'll achieve your aim in the end. So you just have to be determined to reach the final goal. which is what I did.
We might have to cut the Q&A session there, but thank you so much, Stevens, for providing that insight to us. Thank you very much.
Can I download my talk from Dropbox? Is it on the internet?
I just introduce our next speaker, Mr. James Lee. So James is an academic surgeon from the Monash University Endocrine Surgery Unit at the Alfred Hospital. And after completing his surgical training, he undertook further subspecialty training in endocrine surgery at the Austin Hospital, as well as the T.S. Reid Fellow at the Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney. Following his fellowships, he's undertaken full-time research work at the Colling Institute of Medical Research in Sydney, which has culminated in his PhD award, which has been looking at the role of tumour and circulating mRNA biomarkers, specifically in the occurrence of papillary thyroid cancer. So currently, through his appointments as a senior lecturer at Monash University and as the Younger Fellows representative of the RAC, the RACS, section of Academic Surgery Committee, he continues to contribute to pursuing his academic interests alongside his great clinical work. If you join me in welcoming James.
Thank you for that introduction. Just give me 1 minute to load my talk. I just need to work out how to download it onto the computers from a Dropbox. Oh, do you think I can actually just do it from here? Wait, sorry. Sorry, wait, just...
Yeah, I'll just give it a quick download. Wait, you download it? Let's just go back. So that's the file. Yeah. All right. Thank you for your attention, everyone. So my name is James. So I'm a surgeon from the Alfred and Monash Health, and I also got an academic appointment with Central Clinical School at the Alfred Hospital. So you've heard 3 excellent talks. I just want to put my presentation in perspective. So what you've heard so far tonight is the pointy end of the pyramid. I'm just going to bring you back down to earth a little bit, closer from the basics. Before you can get up to that pointy end, you need to learn some basic skills. And I hope my presentation, I'll try not to run too long because we're running late already. But my presentation, I hope to give you some tips on writing a manuscript or an abstract. But more importantly, I would like to inspire you to go down that path and write your first manuscript. Actually, just before I start, how many here have published a manuscript? A couple, a few, good. And how many have presented at a conference? A few, very good. So let's get started. I'll just have one disclaimer. I am here, first of all, to speak to you, but also I do run a course in the second half of the year targeted at junior doctors, surgical doctors, and 3+ year medical students in how to perform surgical research. just the basic stuff. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So why do we need to write a manuscript? Can someone give me a reason why do we need to publish our work? I want to be a bit more interactive because it's late. Come on. Yes, you want to communicate with others. That's a very good reason. Anything else?
Educational message.
Yes. Yes. Anything else? To demonstrate your own ability. Very good. So I think there are a few primary reasons. I think the biggest reason, and though this was touched upon earlier by one of the other presenters, you want to communicate your findings so that you can benefit more people. Whether it's a positive finding or a negative finding, it's important to spread that message because you might save, even if it's a negative finding, you might save someone else the time and effort to doing the same thing if they know that's not going to work. And if it's something that helps patients, then you're helping more than one patient at a time. So I think that's a good thing. And it also increases the accountability of what you've done because you're on the record. And it ensures that you take the due diligence in making sure that whatever goes on the record is and its contribution to the wider scientific community in general by adding to the knowledge pool. But secondary, it has been said that a research project has not contributed to science until its methods and results have been accurately reported in a paper in the literature. So just bear that in mind. So secondarily, I think writing manuscripts is unfortunate, rightly or wrongly, is one of the very few hard and fast metrics that people can, that institutions and organizations can use to judge how good we are. Because at the end of your medical school years, all of you is gonna have MBBS or MD or whatever the degree is now. At the end of your surgical training, everyone is gonna have FICS. So you think you work really, really hard to get those qualifications, but actually you're all at the same level. Just think that, but it's true. So if you have a look at surgical application or job applications for a surgeon, what do they ask? They ask how many papers you presented, what conferences you have presented in, and what other activities you do, what other volunteering work you do, and what other educational work. So you gotta think strategically, plan ahead, and try and have and cover all your bases to stand out from the rest of the crowd. And again, it's been said before, it adds diversity to one's surgical career. So it adds a string to your bow. And it's definitely, for me personally, it definitely increases my job satisfaction. Every time I have a abstract accepted at a conference, I still get very excited. Every time I get invited to talk to you guys, I get really excited. It's like a drug, you know, the more you publish, the more you need it. The period between publication gets shorter and shorter before you start thinking, oh my God, I'm such a failure, I haven't done anything yet. I think Hannah's nodding her head quite vigorously. So, luckily, to write a manuscript is actually, I mean, it is difficult, but on the other hand, it's not, because there is a very strict and standard format for writing a manuscript, starting with the introduction, followed by methods, then results, discussion, and conclusion. So 99.9% of the published manuscript would have this format, and only occasionally they deviate from this. And we will talk a little bit more about this as we go. So while this is the standard structure of your manuscript, you also need to keep a few other points in mind of what makes a good manuscript or good scientific writing in general. First of all, if you've done the research, you should already have the content. However, you also need to present your content in a way that flows nicely from the introduction to the conclusion, which brings you back to the starting point. Kind of like a storyline, you know, you need closure to the introduction. It needs to have a strong theme which reflects your purpose, and that sense of purpose needs to be really strong. In terms of style, apart from sticking to that standard structure that everyone, or your audience will be, your readers will be used to, it also depends on what type of paper you write. That may vary a little bit. So if you're writing a systematic review or a retrospective review versus a randomized control trial result. So the style changes according to that. And also it can change according to which journal article you're submitting it in terms of how you cite things and what type of language you do. So before you submit a paper to a particular journal, just read a few papers from that journal to try and get a sense of what sort of writing style they like. The language that you use in scientific writing needs to be precise and purposeful and concise. It needs to be unambiguous. You shouldn't use terms like, we use lots of patients. You need to specify how many patients you've used or what length of time had the cells been incubating rather than a couple of days, for example. All these things seem really, really logical, but trust me, when you come to writing, you'll start spoken language. You just got to remind yourself that you just got to edit that out. And you've got to be impartial. You shouldn't say things like, so-and-so wrote a paper and that was not very good. But you need to be impartial. You need to just stick to the facts and not put in your own emotions into it. And finally, every published paper in all the respected journals goes through a peer review process. I mean, this is kind of like the television test audience. They want to know whether what you're writing is relevant to the audience. Which means that even if it gets rejected, it doesn't mean it's a bad paper. It might just mean that it doesn't suit the audience. So you need to know your audience. And it's like a gatekeeper, it's quality control as well. They act as a gatekeeper and quality control. Yeah. So I just want to expand a little bit on my point about writing, even though it's scientific writing, but it still needs to have a storyline. So taking your reader from introduction to discussion and conclusion, you need to have a very strong storyline, but you can't just have one comparison of one thing, A and B, and that's the end of the story. Then, what else are you going to write in there? So you need to have other perspectives of the same subject, maybe a couple of them, but it all needs to originate from the same idea and come back to support the same conclusion. So, for example, you've done this research project on a new procedure which supposedly causes less post-operative pain. And so your primary outcome, or your main question might be looking at the pain score of these patients post-operatively and also their analgesia requirement post-operatively. But what else can you add to enrich this story? You can also, on top of that, add in things like their length of stay. Do they have shorter length of stay? Do they have fewer days off work? How quickly do they get back to playing golf or doing their daily activity compared to the old procedure? You can also look at whether they are less likely to be readmitted with pain or whether they're less likely to pay visits to the GP. So all these things requires forward planning, because you haven't got the data, you can't write it. You need to start planning your manuscript when you start to plan your project. And when you're planning that project, you need to start thinking, how am I going to present all these things, all these data we're collecting? But make no mistake, writing is a process. It can be a long and difficult process. Good scientific writing takes a lot of time. And you should never expect to write a perfect piece of work just by going through it once. I am sure Leonardo da Vinci didn't finish this in a day or two. I don't know how long he took, but I'm pretty sure he started with something like this and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and that's what he got. So this is the same. This is the same with writing. So those of you who have done some writing, do you agree? Good. So to be able to produce a masterpiece, you need to have a workflow. You can't just randomly start writing and expect to write something really good. Doesn't matter how much time you spend on it. But so this is kind of my own workflow. You, after a couple of papers, you'll start to develop your own workflow, but this is something for you to work off on and adjust as necessary. So the hardest thing is to put pen to paper. To the first word is always the hardest word to write. So a couple of tricks about that. So the first words I write, the first 5, I already know for my next paper what are the first 5 words I'm going to write. I'm going to write introduction, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. 5 words. Paper, then I put spaces in them, and I put my name on there, I put my degree on there. So, and then it just gets the sort of thought process going, and then I start putting in things down in dot points. So I just basically, excuse me for sounding crazy, I basically just vomit all my ideas on the paper, onto the computer, onto my Word document. I just put everything down, roughly put them in the right category, in the right sections, and then I arrange these ideas into a story. Because you've been working on this project for weeks, months, or even years. So you have a lot to say. You just don't know how or in what order to say it. So once it's on paper, you can then start to play with that. And then I would go through each section and refine each section by section. And then once I'm happy with the storyline, once I'm happy with the order of things I'm saying, I then go through each sentence with a fine-tooth comb and make sure I proofread and draft and edit, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, and then I send my draft off for comment for my co-authors or my supervisors. And I repeat this as many times as necessary. So this process on the one slide can take weeks, even months sometimes. So it doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as you get there. And even though we've said that your manuscript should start with the introduction and then end to the conclusion, I actually don't sort of work on it. I put all my ideas on paper, but when I come to the section by section, I do it in a different order. But there is a method in this madness. I start with the results. I start by doing my tables and figures. Again, it's things that are more fun and that you already have the results if you've already done the study. So it's just to get me going. So I pretty much have on paper all the tables and figures I want to include. I arrange them into the order that they should appear. And that's pretty much my storyline. It's like a storyboard. You've got all these 4 or 5 figures or 6 figures in there. And then I write the text to accompany that. Once I've done that, I know what methods that I've used needs to go in, because you don't need to put extra methods that you're not going to discuss in the results. So that naturally flows on to methods, which should be easy to write because you've done it all. And then once I've got my results and methods in, I then have my introduction to introduce all the ideas that is going to appear in the results. And then once I've done the introduction, I can discuss my results reflecting the aims and hypotheses that I've written in the introduction. And then the last thing I do is actually the abstract. So can you imagine, just think, when you go to the movies, you watch the trailer. When do you think they make the trailer? Do they make the trailer before they make the movie? Or do you think they make the movie first and then they cut and edit into the trailer? So this is a bit like that. You have your movie, you have your story all written, and then you gotta edit it into the abstract. And I'll move on to the abstract next. And then sometimes you might even have to change your title from what you originally had in mind, because you might realize in your discussion or in your results, the title does not reflect what you're about to say. So in terms of the abstract, so people talk about abstracts a lot. The abstract can be used to submit to a conference for a presentation. That's called conference abstract, or it can be an abstract to your manuscript. So the conference abstract is basically a competition. It's like you're submitting this abstract so that you can be selected to present at a conference. So you need to, I guess it's not very good quality, but you need to show off as much as you can. You need to, but within reason, you need to be accurate, but you need to show why this is so interesting, why people want to listen to you, why your study is so good, why it benefits as many people as possible. And you need to stick to the word limit that they give you. Manuscript abstract, you need it's sort of similar, but you need to have a little bit more methodological scientific details in it, so that because this often the only thing that the reader will read, you're flicking through, like, you're sitting on your couch, you're flicking through Netflix, you watch a preview, you go, nah. So people sit in front of their computer or on the toilet with the journal, flicking through the abstracts, going, nah, boring, boring. So you need to write in your abstract something to catch the eye. You need to concisely describe what you're about to tell them and convince them that you're using methods that are orthodox and are accurate, and your result's gonna be valid, and then you've got interesting results to show. So it takes a lot of practice. And both the conference abstract and the manuscript abstract need to be standalone pieces of writing, meaning that you can never say anything like, for example, for the conference app, you should never say, oh, the results will be presented in the conference. That's not a proper abstract. Or you can't say, refer to table so-and-so in the manuscript. So it needs to stand alone. Everything you say in there needs to be concise and not referencing to other things. So again, it's this idea of academic surgery, manuscript writing, presenting in a conference. In my mind, it's basically a cross between my left and right brain, the creative side and the scientific side. When I was in high school, I always wanted to be an architect or industrial designer or something like that. I was a very creative person. But I somehow did medicine for whatever reason. I wanted to be a psychiatrist until I failed my psychiatry term in 5th year and decided, nah, psychiatry is so boring. So then when I fell into academic surgery and started writing abstracts, started doing conference presentations, I really felt like what I was meant to do, because yes, it was difficult learning the medicine, learning the surgery, learning the technical aspect of it, but you're just doing something that someone else has worked out for you. Someone has told you, the artery is on the left of the vein and this and that, and cut here and so that. So my creative side of my brain has been dormant for years and years until I came across this concept of creating, doing projects and writing things and presenting at conferences. So I find that gives a balance to my career and gives a balance to my life. I mean, work-life balance has been talked about a lot. I mean, of course, you need to spend time with your and friends outside of work. But in some ways, if you enjoy what you do, it becomes a lifestyle. So when I'm at home, rather than watching crap TV, I could be making a presentation for you guys, for example. I'm very excited about this because Annals of Surgery, one of the most highly regarded journals in surgery, has now introduced this concept of visual abstracts, which are basically infographics that summarizes the whole study. And I think this is a great way in this technological day and age, much better to look at something like this on the iPhone or iPad than to have to actually read a whole heap of text. And as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you can condense a lot of information into one single slide. So just to finish up, I just want to stress that how many of you speak a second language? Yeah, oh, lots of people. English is not my first language. That was one of the other struggles I had, because I thought I would never be able to do anything like this because I can't even write in the correct tense, let alone write a whole manuscript. So I had to overcome that struggle. How many of you play a musical instrument? Quite a lot as well. I'm sure all of you drive. So what's the common theme in learning all these skills? You got to practice. So it's the same with writing. The more you practice, the better you are at it. And quite often, I still remember the day that I got my first manuscript accepted. It was just a case report. I've done all the research and all the work for the case report when I was in my second year of surgical training out of 6. I did not publish it until I was in my fellowship year, like 5 years later, because I just didn't know what to do. But then I thought, man, I wasted all that effort. I just need to keep plugging away at it. So people think that you know, you just have this idea, you go and do a research term for 3 months, and then you publish this paper in New England Journal of Surgery. But in fact, there's no such a journal, by the way. But in fact, you go through blood, tears, and sweat that people don't see. So I guess I just want you to realize that there is a lot of hard work behind every single presentation, behind every publication, but the reward makes it worthwhile. So if this is what you want to do, what can you do? Who and what are your resources? I think the first resource, well, for me anyway, the reason why I picked up my case report that I left aside for 5 years was because I came across this book in one of the conferences, How to Write a Paper. So I bought this book. It's only like this, it's only A5 size, you know, less than 100 pages thick. I read it, I'm like, oh, I can do this. So I did, and I published it. So now I'm reading this book, and I came across this book in a bookshop not long ago. It's called The Element of Style. It's about how to write concisely, how to write in the right language, how to write in the right tense, how to sound good with not too many words. Completely nothing to do with scientific writing, but I think I would highly recommend it if you have time to read this before you start writing. Or you can look up journal papers. Melina Kibi, who is the president of the Association for Academic Surgery in the US, published in our journal, in the NZ Journal of Surgery, How to Write a Paper. Of course, there are online tutorials that you can see on YouTube, or just simply Googling the topic. And by the way, I learned a lot of my statistics knowledge and my even lab knowledge and skills from Googling things and watching YouTube videos. So finally, I just want to, again, bring to your attention a few other opportunities. So obviously, there's the course that we run in the second half of this year, which by the way, will be on campus this year. And there will be, there's a website link that you can go and have a look. And there is limited spaces for medical students, because we're trying to focus more on the junior doctors. But last year we had about 50% medical students and 50% junior doctors, and both groups found it very useful. Some students were in the middle of the BMed year, and they said, oh, we wish we had a course like this at the start. And some were about to go overseas to embark on their BMed year, and they said this has given them the confidence to know how to collect data, how to analyze data, and how to write and present their work. And if you fancy going to Adelaide, there are 2 other conferences you can go to this year. One in May, which is the Developing a Career in Academic Surgery, DCAS. This workshop is a 1-day workshop that takes place every year just before the ASC, before the scientific conference. And then finally in November, the DCAS course is always run in the same city as the ASC, the Annual Scientific Congress. And finally, there's a joint academic meetings in November, again, also in Adelaide this year. This one also travels around between cities of the Eastern Seaboard. This year, so I'm one of the conveners of this conference, and this year we are having a couple of workshops on manuscript writing and developing a surgical project. So if that's of interest and you're able to make it, that will be on the first day, which is the 9th of November of that conference. So thank you very much for your attention. I know it's getting late. Please feel free to email me or ask me any questions. Oh, thank you very much. Just log out of mine. Thank you. Just please log out of my Dropbox.
So I've now got the pleasure to introduce our final speaker for the evening. So Dr. Hannah Tan is actually one of our own. She was a Monash graduate 4 years ago, a while ago. And she was also the co-chair of MUSIG for a couple of years as well. So she finished a BMed Sci between her final year and her 4th year of study, and she published like half a dozen papers as a medical student. So yeah, so she'll be coming up to talk to us about that. Cool. Welcome, Hannah. Oh, I've got to talk.
I put my talk on a USB and then I left it at work. So
Why didn't you
it's
email it?
someone who
Which one is it?
that's a good question.
Where is it? This one? Social innovation. Is it? This one?
Research doc?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, thanks. Is it this one?
So you have to use this.
I have to use that one?
keyboard. Yeah.
Okay.
Just like left and right.
All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Introduction. It was actually a pleasure to get an email saying, "Can you please come and talk at our thing?" Because that's what I used to do. I used to email everyone, "Go, please come and talk at our thing." So it's come full circle. So I'm so happy to be here, guys, and also to be here on the same placard as two professors and two amazing surgeons who have PhDs. This is a dream come true. Okay, so how do you actually get started? Because James is saying that he was sort of the bottom rung. Guess what? I am the bottom rung. This is the bottom rung when we look at the pyramid. Okay, so how do you even get started? How do you even get started? And excuse me. So I think Michael's already said this, but basically, I was a Monash student here, and I decided that I really like surgery, and maybe I'll be in this surgical committee, and maybe I'll become the chair of the surgical committee. And luckily, everyone believed in me and kept voting me and said that was nice. And then I was like, maybe I like this research thing. I'll do a BMed Sci. So I finished all those crappy exams in 4th year and decided, let's do that. So I took a year off. It was great. Drank a lot of cider and did some research. It was good. And then went to the Alfred for my internship. And James was actually one of my consultants. I don't know if he remembers. And then I jumped across the river. And then I jumped across the river and decided to go to St. Vincent. So now I'm over there as a surgical resident. I'm also doing my master's at the moment through Monash. So why would you want to do research as a medical student? You're so busy. You're so busy, and you've got exams, and it's horrible. Well, it's not going to get better, to be honest. You actually have a lot of time to do stuff, and you guys get holidays, and why wouldn't you want to do research while you're on holidays? The hospitals never close, and the registrars never go on holiday, and your bosses never go on holiday. So if you wanted to pick something up, you really could, and everyone is really excited to have you there. I realise now being at Melbourne that med students are not around, and when they appear, I'm so excited. I'm like, oh gosh, please come again tomorrow. Please hold some folders for me and be interested and be here. So why would you want to do research on top of all of that? Well, the thing is that you have to start small. You have to start somewhere. And a boss is never going to let you do something if you don't know at least sort of how to do it. So you've got to start with something small, maybe help on someone's project, maybe help on some resident's project and say, can I help you do some data collection? And then you say, can I maybe be an author on this thing that you're doing data collection for? Maybe I can help you write results or something. And that's how you start. You just find someone who can trust you. And then once someone trusts you, you can find someone who can trust you more with something. So then you can say to a boss, oh, can I maybe do something for you in terms of research? And they'll ask you, what have you done so far? And they can say, well, I've helped in some data collection, so I sort of know how this works, okay? And everyone sort of touched on this before, and you sort of want to contribute as well. It's sort of like a sense of ownership of this, and it's that sense of achievement that James was talking about. It's sort of a bit of a drug. You sort of get hooked on it, and you want to do more and more. And then Prof. Smith was saying that you really need to get into surgical training, and it's true. If you can Google all of these surgical entry requirements, and you can see what you need to get on, and it's really scary sometimes how much stuff there is on a CV, and everyone's going to be striving for that. Some specialties are worse than others. Plastics only wants things that you have published in journals that they like. Other places are not so stringent. So luckily, things like ENT don't need you to publish in certain journals or in something. They just want the fact that you've actually done it before. Because part of your surgical training as well is going to be doing some sort of research, and you actually have to do some sort of project. A lot of them have that. And then some people do PhDs in between and stuff as well. And then you get to present all your work, and it's fun. And as I said, it's the best time to do it as a medical student, as a junior doctor. Once you become a registrar, you've got no time. And you might not even become a registrar if you don't do it. And the thing is that, it's true. I'm trying to be honest here. Because research is great. And the thing is that you need to be interested in it as well. Pick something that you're going to be interested, that you actually want to look up, that you want to learn something more about, or else you're never going to do it. You're never going to do it. You're just going to sort of let it mull there for a while. And if you're not excited to do a literature review, then you're never going to do it. Okay, so I'll touch a little bit on the BMed side. So we sort of said this, so you need to think about it early. Think about what specialty you want to do and try and pick that as your BMed side project. If you have no idea, you probably shouldn't do a BMed side because it is a long time to be stuck in doing something that you don't actually like. So think about it really hard. If you're interested in something, pick it. I did that, and then I decided that I didn't like it later on. But it's okay because at least you have that experience. I used it as an experience thing, okay? You want to pick an appropriate project as well. So think about whether or not it's prospective or retrospective, what they actually want you to do, whether or not it's a lab thing. I'll talk about this a little bit later. But you want to pick something where someone's not going to say, oh, can you finish off someone's PhD? Don't fall for that, okay? And think about where you want to do it as well. So I really, really, really wanted to go to the Alfred as an intern, really, really. And so I picked somewhere where I would be able to do my BMed Sci, like at the Alfred. And then when you go to your interview and you say, why do you want to come to the Alfred? You can say, I was a BMed Sci student here. I really liked it. And that goes down really well because you spent a whole year there and you know people. You can actually say, I have really worked here and I like it. Do you know what I mean? And sort of think about it like that, okay? So if you're planning to go across the pond, maybe you try and go across the pond and do it, you know? And think about what kind of supports you're going to have as a BMed Sci student there. So if you go overseas, you might not have as many supports and structure as you would if you did it here. So think about that as well. And then think about what else can I do during my BMed Sci. So it's a whole year. You can maybe go to theatre if your supervisor is happy for you to do that. Or you can jump onto other projects that your supervisor might have that aren't part of your BMed Sci, okay? And then get a little bit more done. And the thing is that the BMed Sci, at the end of it, you get a mark, and that mark doesn't mean anything because at the end of it, you all have a BMed Sci. And so you've got to get something more out of it than just a BMed Sci. You need to publish what you did because why would you do it unless you could publish it? Okay, so how do you avoid making a bad decision about research? Okay, this is number one, pick a good supervisor, okay? Think about who you're asking to work with and ask other people, who have they worked with that you know? You know, maybe they had a BMed Sci student the previous year, track them down, ask them questions, how were they as a supervisor? Were they really bad? Were they really good? If they're really good, then obviously jump on that, you know? And then manage their expectations as well. Some people don't actually get it. Like they don't actually understand what you're trying to achieve through your BMed Sci. If they've never had a BMed Sci student before, you probably shouldn't go with them, okay? And just in general as well with research. Try and manage exactly what they want you to do. Because it could be that they just want you to, you know, try and do it. They're not actually into it. You sort of do it half-heartedly and they don't actually expect you to publish it or present at a conference. Okay, and then communication is a huge thing. If you email someone and say, hey, can I come and do something with you? Email for a week more, ever, don't go with them, okay? You want to have someone who's enthusiastic, who wants you there with them. We'll set up a meeting and say, yep, that sounds great. I'll meet you, you know, next week or something. We can talk about things. I've got so many things lined up that you could jump onto. That's who you want to go with, okay? And then obviously realistic goals as a med student, you want someone who's going to say, okay, let's aim to, you know, do this case report or something. And that's realistic, okay? And the other thing is that maybe you can have more than one supervisor. That's what I had when I was at the Alfred. I had someone who was the head of the Burns unit, who was a very, very busy lady. But then I also had someone who was a research fellow, and he had all the time in the world to chat to me, answer my questions. He would be the first port of call. So think about whether or not that's an option as well, to have someone else who you can see day to day who can help you out. Okay. So how do you choose what you do? So for BMed Sci, I had the option of doing something clinical where I would be in the hospital or going to a lab. Go to the lab and look at where you're going to be for a really long time. And then you can make an informed decision, okay? And you have to think about, what can I achieve? So when you start working and you're with a unit for, say, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, are you going to be there for 6 months or more? Then you can sort of take on something a little bit more. So this year I'm going to be at St. Vincent's and also Peter Mac. So I can do something where I look at patients who are at St. Vincent's and then go to Peter Mac and then include those people as well. And the boss who I'm doing it with works at both places. So it works really nicely. So think about that as well. And then, as I said before, think about whether or not it's retrospective or prospective. If it's a prospective thing, it will take you a long time to get the data that you need for it to be meaningful. And then think about whether or not it's part of a bigger thing. So lab things are usually part of a bigger thing, and your standalone thing might not be what they want to publish, because yours just fits into someone's PhD, someone's big project, and they're just going to take your bit and then put it into someone else's, and then they want to aim for Nature or something, you know. So think about that as well. And the other thing is that you can be proactive. I think all the bosses were saying this as well. Think about, like, when you're on a ward round, register, I was like, that's really weird, that's really rare. When you see something that's happened or a complication or something like that, if they say something like that, you should be like, can I do that as a case report? Do you think that it would be interesting? And they might say, yeah, it would be. And then do a literature review. See if there's anything else that's been published like that. See if you guys have got a new angle on it, or ask your registrar, could there be a different angle on, you know, this paper that I saw? It's similar, but ours can be different in X, Y, Z way, you know. And you know, that's how you get into it, because someone's like, oh, that was really, really smart idea. And the other thing is that when you're doing your projects, think about something else that you could maybe use the same data set for and then make a different project. So when I was doing my BMed Sci, I was looking at all these operational reports, and Burns operational reports are really horrible because you're operating everywhere in part of the body, using different techniques everywhere. And it was so hard to understand what was going on. And then each part had a different treatment dressing thing that they needed to have. And so I said, there has to be a better way to do this. So I sort of investigated doing maybe an electronic one, and then went through the hospital system trying to create something that could work there. And then I ended up having that as a poster later on as well. Okay. So it's all very fun and exciting, but sometimes you take on a little bit too much, and then you think, oh, there's a lot of stuff on my plate. I don't really want to do this right now. And that happens. That's okay. It's with everything, you know. And so it happened for me when I was in my internship, and I sort of just wanted to take a bit of a break and just focus on clinical stuff, because you've got to make sure that you're up to speed on that stuff too. So don't get too carried away with being a good researcher and not being up to it clinically. So just make sure you use some time for that as well, okay? And set deadlines for yourself. Say, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to try and finish writing up my methods, or tomorrow I'm going to try and do my results or something like that. Or I want to, you know, submit this manuscript for this conference. And so you have a deadline for yourself, and then you can strive towards that, okay? And then ask for help as well. There are heaps of statisticians around at Monash University. They just sort of lurk somewhere in the Alfred Hospital. And they will help you do something. And all you have to say is, you can be an author on this paper. Can you help me do it? And they will do a better job than you will ever do while watching YouTube videos trying to figure out how to use your stats program. And they will gladly do it. And that's a thing. So see if that's an option, you know, email someone and say, hey, I'm having trouble trying to figure out this stats thing, and can you help me? So you can do that too, okay? And then you can always take a break. So last year I took a break to do my primary exam and to do the diploma of anatomy, and I was not going to do any research through that. So think about your priorities at the time and then figure it out as well, okay? Okay, and then the fun stuff. So, this is Fenway Park up there. I got to go over there as a 5th year medical student to present my VMed Sci data, and it was amazing. And the thing with a good supervisor is they also help you go there. So they gave me the money to fly over there for a couple of days just to present my retrospective data, and it was great. And then up here is Cambridge. So I went to Cambridge for my elective, and I did it in plastic surgery. And there was a supervisor there who just loved medical students, and he had case reports up to his eyeballs that he just wanted someone to write. And so he just gave it to me and said, go for it. And I managed to get that published as well. So you just got to find someone who's interested in you, you're interested in them, and you just do what they ask of you, and you can get some good stuff out of it. And then, so that's Singapore and also Sydney. So you can go all over, and you can submit your paper like to a couple of conferences and present it a couple of times actually if you want. So it's a really good opportunity to go somewhere for a bit of a holiday and also to put something on your CV. So yeah, get onto it, guys. It's some really good fun.
Hannah's always full of great advice. I remember, you probably don't remember this, Hannah, but we had a committee brunch or something a couple of years ago, and you said some similar stuff, and yeah, that's really good. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Morning.
Thanks for staying.
Yeah, thank you. We've just got one last thing to do. So we had an e-raffle for a couple of surgical textbooks. So we've got the winners for those. These are still around.
Thanks.
Can I announce them? Yeah, you can announce them if you like. Do we have the books? So we're sponsored by Elsevier for this. Here you go.
Oh, okay.
You may announce.
All right. So, is there? Does it have to be in this order?
Yeah. The first few.
First few. Okay. Do they get the same thing?
So there's 2 books from Prof. Smith, and no, they get 1 each. And then there's one.
Oh, okay.
That's Prof. Smith's book.
Oh, so it's the same.
And then one is different. The other one is that one. So I don't know how they're all about the same value.
Okay. And the first winner is Jessie who?
Jessie around?
Yes, redraw.
Redraw.
It is.
Redraw. Yeah, redraw. Okay.
Next person.
Okay, next person. Type Wen Lim.
He left as well.
Yeah.
Oh, redraw.
Okay. You got to tell them tomorrow that they could have won something, but they left. And they also missed the best talk. How do I open? Okay, Ali Shoshtari. Oh, okay. Back up if they're not present. Here we go. Samantha Clay.